I'd like to welcome you to our second voyage of musical discovery for 2019. We're going to be exploring the cultural and historical contexts of music from the Mannheim court in the 18th century, and also from Chinese and contemporary Australian music. This hub of musical activity has become known as the Mannheim School, and is best recognised today as the place where they invented a myriad of orchestral techniques, such as the orchestral crescendo, the grand pause, and the quirky devices like the Mannheim rocket and the Mannheim sigh. They introduced the woodwinds into the orchestra, and they refined sonata form, and the concept as well for the four-movement orchestral work known as the symphony. Historically, this was the moment that the classical symphony orchestra was born. Two important movers and shakers from the Mannheim School, who were sadly little known today, were the Czech composer and violinist Johann Stamitz, who's considered to be the founding father of the Mannheim School, and whose own sons became the second generation of the Mannheim composers, and the multi-talented Austro-Moravian Franz Xaver Richter, who was a singer, a violinist, composer, conductor, and music theoretician. Their musical style had a profound impact on composers and performers from the classical era and beyond, including the young Mozart, who visited Mannheim with his father when he was 21. The key of A major is said to be one of rejoicing and youthful cheerfulness. Stamitz does an excellent job of establishing the brilliant and uplifting key of A major right from the beginning. He immediately introduces a sequence of syncopated melodic figures in the first violin, which gives the music energy and bounce. There's a specific name for this type of syncopated rhythm, which the violins are going to play. That term is actually called a Lombard rhythm, but we commonly call it a Scotch snap. You might have heard recently that the contemporary singer-songwriter Ariana Grande, she was recently accused of plagiarism in a song that she brought out in January this year called Seven Rings. The accusers were claiming that she stole their Lombard rhythmic device from them, which gives her song this same energy and bounce that the Stamitz Symphonia has. I think that if they did their homework, they might be surprised that this plagiarism, if it can be called this, goes back way longer than last year's hip-hop releases. Immediately following the Lombard rhythm theme, he introduces a more lyrical theme, something like from an opera. Not surprisingly, this kind of writing is known as the Italian operatic style. From that moment, the rock and roll style for which Mannheim was really well known kicks in. This technique for the first violins is called bariolage. You might notice that we have our second violins opposite our first violins. This is the historical layout of the early orchestras, and it may be different to what you're used to in a modern symphony orchestra. Notice how the classical antiphony is more effective this way. The opening section of this first movement finishes with a barrage of Italianate arpeggio figures. Throughout this whole movement, the chordal textures and harmonic rhythm are played by the continuo team, or in official terminology, the basso continuo, which is basically a fancy term for the basso, which is the bass line, and the continuo, which means the chordal instruments on top of the bass notes. In today's bands, we'd call them the rhythm section. The function of the basso continuo was really important in Baroque music. for providing the harmonic and the rhythmic basis of the music. And this is carried forward into this repertoire in the early classical period in Mannheim and beyond. There's a certain amount of artistic freedom. Different combinations of all these instruments we have here today would be possible, as long as we have a bass line being played by a cello or a double bass or a bassoon, and as long as we have chordal instruments like the harpsichord or the theorbo, then we have basso continuo. We've chosen for this program this week to combine all these glorious sounds for a really full and varied continuo sound. You might be interested to know that both Anthony on the harpsichord and Simon on his theorbo are improvising most of their notes. They both just read the bass line and then they just fill in the harmonies however they like, within reason, to either add more energy or to bring more calm to the music according to what the music is asking for. In this particular Sinfonia by Stamitz, though, the inner parts played by the second violins and by the violas are actually also part of the continuo team. Now we're going to play the whole first movement for you with all the parts working together as a team. So listen to the contrasting themes and the devices. Notice how short each of these ideas are and compare them in your mind to classical orchestral works which you might be familiar with, where the composers took this music a step further and elaborated their ideas and themes. Listen to how all these elements combine to create the foundation of a style and a cultural language of the early classical period in Mannheim. All of this in just 4.5 minutes.